3 of you, a dozen, doesn't matter. I could handle 1,000. It's time to get back to the 9 in the emergents verse. I almost said it's time to get back to the 9 and to rhyme, but then some of you would already be gone. Said anyway. The 9 are gearing up for the culmination of their first arc, and also their first official intertitle crossover between the 9 and zoemg. The stakes are getting higher as the series approaches 0th hour. Greetings, comic lovers, and welcome back to Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from news, comics new and old, to history to anecdotes, really wherever our whims take us. Some of you have been asking about the 9, and so I'm thrilled to say that once more I'm partnering with Interpop Comics. InterpopComics.com houses the comic efforts of Interpop and their mission to build up a new shared superhero universe built upon a purely digital approach, time of recording, and fan engagement. I partnered with them before to talk about their social media based hero zoemg, or zoemg. You may have heard it both ways or thought it both ways. And also I've talked about the 9, so if you missed any of that, I will of course have links. For those who have missed those videos, I'll briefly explain the mission statement, what's going on and how it all works. So if you already know and you just want to get right to the 9, I'll have a little chapter code for you to skip to. Let's get ready for explanations. Interpop Comics' digital strategy involves comics first being sold digitally before eventually being made free to read on the site and remaining that way. There are regular covers and variants, which as per variant standards are more expensive than your regular cover. And they are priced comparably to your usual mainstream digital fare, but with the increased level of ownership, which for some adds value. They can be purchased with your standard currency or with cryptocurrency. Once purchased, you're then able to vote on issues that pertain to the comic that you bought, with results that will range from having a minor to a major impact. The end result of this crossover is actually going to be heavily influenced by some of the votes that went on. When/if you purchase is delivered to you as an NFT, rather than your standard digital fare. Now I'm aware that NFTs are a bit of a hot button issue time of recording, and one should look into them and do your own research. And just see if it's for you and how you feel about it. Do you find value in it? Some do and some don't. And in general, because they're so new, some are vastly overvalued because of the speculation that's going on. But that happens at the start of a lot of speculator booms. There have also been some scams and some art theft that have cropped up. Sadly, art theft is a very common thing on the internet. Now this is not the case of what's going on here at Interpop Comics. Here the artists and creators are directly involved with the products being produced, and the yield is going back to them and the company they work for. Some artists feel this gives them more control over their work, or could in the long run, once optimized, aid in identifying and stamping out art theft by being able to identify authentic versus bootleg copies. Artists like Butcher Billy, who did a special variant for the 9 number 5. Butcher is partnering with Interpop for their MinterPop project, a sustainable NFT marketplace. He'll be dropping original art from his collection, the Holy Bible Butcher Billy version, beginning on February 16th. It's a 1-to-1 auction with 7 weekly drops, and the auctions run for 48 hours. This here on the screen are the current collections. Butcher's drop on February 16th, time of recording. If you're interested, I'll have the link down below. If not, then don't click it. I know that some are leery because of the stories they've heard, so again, do your research and look into it. Interpop Comics is also utilizing Tezos blockchain technology, which is a more environmentally sound option as the technology itself continues to optimize. Tezos is an energy-efficient proof-of-stake network. Minting an NFT on Tezos requires the same amount of energy you'd produce biking for 7 seconds, because I know some are very concerned about the carbon footprints NFTs do or do not leave. Like with anything, it's entirely up to you. Some just aren't into it or just want to meme it, and that's fine. You can always read for free or check out something else that's more your taste. But hopefully if it's not for you, it can be a discussion, because oh boy, I've seen things. And if it is for you, now you have something to check out. Everything online is always evolving and changing, as is the emergence universe itself, as it heads towards this big crossover that will finish off their first arc and firmly establish just who the 9 will be, as well as who will be the true heroes and villains of the world. So I figured what better way to get hyped for a crossover than to explore the universe itself, at least the main part where the crux of the action is going to happen, the 9. There's already been a lot of growth throughout these issues. Plots are tightening and coalescing, as are the characterizations, and the vibe that more confidence is felt in the universe is definitely building. The 9 number 3, which is where we left off in our last video, introduced some plot elements that were key in creating a more serious tone to what was going on, as the mystery surrounding the Phaeton incident was revealed, as was the ultimate fate of Phaeton. It's gonna be one of those names for me. I'm that person. Some things I say 2 ways. It's a problem. Also, yes, his name is Phaeton and his father is Professor Helios. Rejoice that your Greek mythology knowledge came in handy. Issues 3 and 4 are now up free to read, so you can catch it before issue 5, which will be the start of the crossover. And issues 1 through 3 of zoemg are up as well. For those who have 0 time, a brief recap. Denny Goodwin, a street-level hero known as the Crime Blotter, had moved on from the superhero team he was a part of called the Upstarts after a devastating event known as the Phaeton Incident, an event they had failed to stop and had left an impact on the city of Culverton. Denny also had some kind of innate connection to the city that allowed him to see connections that others couldn't. He could draw all kinds of conclusions, hence his conspiracy board in his apartment. He bolstered that connection by having a day job as a reporter, An assignment to a local museum set to showcase the Phaeton incident led to him encountering the Tome of Time, a book that somehow gave him the ability to hop through time, transforming him into the Time Blotter. Meeting a mysterious cosmic entity, his new mission is to assemble the Nine. But the Nine not only consists of some foundational heroes such as the Genesis Squadron, but also of the villain Phaeton himself. But he's dead. Or is he? Time Blotter set out to solve the mystery and start to try and assemble the Nine, even though he wasn't exactly sure where to start because he was new to his powers, so he was figuring all that out at the same time. All of this led to him uncovering the truth. What was the ultimate fate of Phaeton, who he had actually mentored? And it was actually a lot more complicated than it first appeared. The first time we saw Time Blotter, then Crime Blotter, interact with Professor Helios, founder of the Phaeton Project, a school to train youths in their abilities to avoid another Phaeton incident, secretly named for his son, who not everyone knew was Phaeton, or so it seems. They fought, and Denny asked him if he killed his son. Just smooth. Top tier tact. Issue 3 will give us the answers. This time we're going to look more in depth into it, and also look a little bit at issue 4. Issue 3 is written by Will Pfeiffer, and unlike prior entries, had several artists. So the art style in this one does noticeably shift, which can get jarring at points. But by the next issue, it's back to having one main artist, and that's Steve Ellis. At points, it appears that it's happening because of the time travel, that each section has a certain style, but some are more distinct than others. The artists for this issue, number 3, are Steve Ellis, Cliff Richards, Adrian Gutierrez, Scott McDaniel, and Mick Gray. Colors by Chris Sotomayor and lettering by Carlos M. Manguel. Professor Helios has taken Time Blotter back to key moments with his son, starting with the accident that occurred on the way to the hospital at his birth. When you have a child, or when you're on the verge of having a child, the possibilities are endless. That baby, that potential human, could turn out to be anyone or anything. But as that child grows, in fact, from the moment that child is born, the possibilities suddenly become less infinite, and almost immediately, you have to adjust your expectations. Despite the ambulance exploding, the baby was mysteriously unharmed. And Helios says they never figured out who it was that attacked them, but that he had so many enemies that really it could have been anybody. The strain of this incident dissolves Helios' marriage to his wife, and Helios makes the decision that his son will have a normal life, and that they'll hide the fact that Helios was ever a superhero or had powers from him. Lies, always a strong family foundation. What could go wrong? Secrets for everyone that never creates any supervillains, ever. Now, Denny is still new to his powers, so he's not the most accurate at getting them exactly to locations. So the next incident is at the prom, where Teen Phaeton's powers went out of control, which despite Denny being there and being one of the people to stop him, he doesn't really remember. This section's art style is the most dissonant from the rest. It recurs a couple more times briefly, and blends very well when it's utilized over in parts of Zoe's comic in issue 3. I actually really liked it. I'd kind of like to read a whole comic with this style, but it stood out here. Denny actually manages to calm Phaeton down, which seems to be the star of their mentorship. How could you possibly forget that? It was the most courageous thing I've ever seen. That's a really interesting question. It brings up all kinds of thoughts about how personal and malleable memories are, how we're constantly rewriting them, editing them. What would it look like to factor the reality of how much we as humans alter our memories through time, or which stand out to us and which don't, to a story where memories are the foundation of how one travels to specific periods of the subject's life? That could be really interesting. They leave that right now for this story, but it's a fascinating concept. The idea that something so important to both Phaeton and Professor Helios' life that was a small enough moment to Denny that he didn't even remember it. It could also introduce a whole question as to why. Was there some kind of manipulation? Was he made to forget? Or did it really just not mean that much to him? Is he someone who very strongly compartmentalizes negative memories? Questions. The concept of human memory fallibility and time travel fascinates me. I'm captivated. As they move along, it's revealed that Phaeton came to hate his father, as after the incident he was kept under watch as much as possible. This to ensure that he didn't use his powers, because Professor Helios never watched Frozen. Denny calls upon his own memories of Phaeton, how earnest he seemed at the start, but even then there's a clear chip because of how he was treated. As Phaeton had come to believe that his father hated him because he had powers and his father didn't. And so he thought it was some kind of jealousy thing, which also gave him a bit of a superiority complex about his own powers. And that would eventually spiral into the Phaeton incident. That with some other factors added on top. Turns out there is no God. There's just me. Well, that escalated quickly. 3 of you, a dozen, doesn't matter. I could handle 1,000. And now you, Crime Blotter, my mentor, my teacher. Time for me to give you a lesson. Time Blotter actually accidentally jumped back to that moment with Helios when he thought he was at first just remembering it, but no, he time traveled. And then a trope happens, personally one of my least favorite tropes. Those versions of the two of them see the alternate younger versions of themselves. paradox, or is it? That always makes things so complicated, because then you have to stop and potentially give a crash course on how your version of time travel works, which they kind of do here but vaguely, saying that this always happened, but time blotter just doesn't have perspective. The theme of perspective is gonna come up again and again for time blotter, but also, nice try, Jan. As mentioned in past videos about this series, time travel. Some can get with it, others not so much. Too many potential plot holes to navigate. Poor Bookworm and Cokes, for most of this they're just standing there watching these two hop back and forth in time. I hope it's only taking a few seconds between each hop. But we're coming to the climax, and at first it appears that Helios has lost it. He just starts talking, seemingly to no one. This was your fault. All of it. It always was. I know you can hear me. He's of course actually talking to Zeroth and his ever-expanding roster of villain archetypes. Worried about Zeroth. He's already got that white hair streak and the satellite, which he's always sitting at and observing people on multiple screens, Ozymandias style. It's fine. It's not fine. Hello, Aloysius. I was wondering when you'd show your face. In between issues 3 and 4, there was an Emergence Presents issue. These are the issues that deal more with the backstory of characters, some who are either not the main focus of the 9 or some who they're just developing. There was one for Zeroth, and it showcased the dissolution of his relationship with Helios, and it was pretty solid. It also played into some of my emerging headcanons about Zeroth and potentially his light alcohol problem. Yes, I have headcanons for this series. Part of how I know I'm invested. It's got its claws in. Think about it. Zeroth has appeared with his own time travel device to help guide Denny. He's gonna take him back to certain moments, but with more accuracy. A precision that completely changes what Denny had just learned. Also, he's able to take all of them, not just Time Blotter and Helios. Whereas when he was just with Helios, Denny had manifested outside the ambulance where the accident occurred with baby Phaeton. Zeroth takes Denny inside of it and leaves the others out, revealing that Helios had lied and that the accident had been caused by the infant himself. And the dissolution of the marriage? It was actually a conversation Helios' wife heard between Zeroth and him about how their child would have godlike level abilities. Zeroth said the baby could save the world, but Helios didn't want that. He just wanted a normal child, and for the child to have the option of having a normal life, so he made that decision for him. He didn't want to put pressure, and ultimately a decision that backfired, but not without some manipulation by Zeroth, who it turns out was the person who leaked the information to his son that his father had kept his superpowers from him. He also leaked it to a bunch of other people at the same time, which calls into question how many people know or don't know about their connection, but still, it was very embarrassing for him. Zeroth sent him over the edge with a text message. There are some intriguing parallels between Zoe and Zeroth and their relationships to technology. It would be very interesting to explore. Dark Zoe arc when? Just waiting for it. I'm like, where's Dark Zoe? We can change her costume. It'll be black now. They keep hinting at Dark Zoe. In her own series, in issue 3, she was casually controlling Cokes, and in Cokes' emergent issues, Sally thinks deeply about how Zoe seems to view emotions in a very cavalier fashion, almost as trivial the way she wields them, and how she's a little concerned that Zoe could go dark. Although this is partially based off of Cokes' own powers to be able to manipulate the dreamscape and see people's deepest, darkest secrets. The fear of losing control is something she also has for herself. Anyway, back to manipulative Zeroth, who says this is all part of something bigger, cause when isn't it? Then he takes him to the final fate of Phaeton. Phaeton had been storing his internal energy, building up so that he would have enough to destroy Culverton, and so his father went to stop him. In a joint plan with Zeroth, they killed him. Helios was the distraction, and Zeroth used his satellite to just bomb him out of existence from orbit. Wait, what are you? Dad, don't leave me. Dad! Our issue ends with the reveal that Zeroth is responsible not just for Phaeton, but for all of them. Super manipulation. Never a good trait to have as a hero. So as mentioned, one of the things about Zeroth Hour is that fans had a heavy impact in the direction that it will go. And that's gonna be a mileage varies type thing. You'll have to see how it plays out. For some, that's really exciting. But for others, if it doesn't go the way you want, it can be frustrating. Still, this event will be the moment to see the payoff. It's actually happening. These things will matter. So one truly does have the potential to impact this universe as it grows. The last 9-issue pre-crossover is issue 4. Issue 4 is personally my favorite issue of the 9 to date, time of recording. At this point, it's clear that direction has been picked. Although there are also some sudden surprise plot elements as well. It's not perfect, but it set up some concepts that I found really intriguing, and some character relationships that hopefully will be more developed. This issue was written by Will Pfeiffer with art by Steve Ellis, colors by Chris Sotomayor, letters by Pat Broso. This is a Fallout issue with the characters reacting to what they learned in issue 3. And then you go from there, but you learn more about them in this issue. Denny gets a whole new layer added to his history with his ex-Devastatrix, as we learn of an incident that destabilized their team even before the Phaeton incident entirely broke it. This is an expansion of a snippet of something we had seen before, but briefly. Just the villain himself, no other details. This is of Devastatrix's sister being kidnapped and brainwashed by a villain, which changed her into, if one is being generous, an anti-hero, but more a villain, with a truly awkward Silver Age name. Brace yourself. Little Susie homewrecker. That's so much edge I cut myself. On the one hand, her costume is kind of hinting at her being younger, and she is Devastatrix's younger sister. So it kind of feels like your first email of villain names. On the other hand, it's making me a little uncomfortable by the implication that Denny also slept with her as well as Devastatrix. I see this panel. I know what hinting looks like. Look at that face. Also, her lipstick is great. 10 out of 10. Denny actually lets her go during this battle, which very much damages his relationship with not just Devastatrix, but the team. He also seemed to low-key agree with her methods, which didn't go over that well either, as she claimed she was trying to save the world and focusing on bigger issues that actually mattered while they were street-level heroes. It created a schism, which is a bit of a contradiction to how Denny described their breakup in issue 0, but this is coming from another character, and the universe has grown and plans have evolved for it since then. Seeing what happened is making Coax question if she even wants to be a hero. Bookworm's fine. He's cold as ice. Zoe, who in her book has been investigating Zeroth, has found something. Being the most tech-savvy, she's known where to look and crack his algorithm a smidge, but he cuts her off before she can tell anybody. By anybody, I mean Coax. He just fries their phones from orbit. Zoe does get through to her eventually to tell her about absolute Zeroth. Zeroth has become obsessed with the fact that he saw himself talk to the cosmic being now named the Chronarchivist, but he doesn't remember it happening and he can't figure it out, so he goes to get Time Blotter, whose abilities he's come to covet because they're much more than his own when it comes to time travel, and he wants that. It would make all of what he's trying to do so much easier. So this next bit is going to depend upon your tolerance of "it was me" Barry levels of reveals. Zeroth tells Time Blotter he's not thinking big enough, only focusing on bringing together 9 heroes. What is he even doing? You have 9 names on your list. 9. I have hundreds. You have no concept of what I've done. How far I've gone to save us all. Oh god, you didn't make a giant squid monster, did you? He didn't, and he's also entering that phase where it just feels like he needs people to talk to, which is where Denny was a few issues ago, so they talk to each other, rather he monologues at Time Blotter a little bit. So okay, you're either gonna stay with me or leave at this point. Aliens. There was an alien threat coming to Earth, so Zeroth seeded emergent life through time by splitting off part of himself to travel back in time to do that. He called that part Absolute Zeroth, and he had reverse hair streaks. That's some silly Silver Age shenanigans. No, maybe early aughts. Early aughts, late 90s shenanigans. Stargate level logic too. Some will enjoy and suspend, and for others it'll be a bridge too far. And it does feel like Zeroth is suddenly moving at Mach 5 from ambivalent towards a more clear set villain route, which personally I hope not. There's so much potential nuance for him. He may be becoming my favorite. Him, Denny, Coax, and Zoe. So the aliens never came, and Zeroth believes this is because of his intervention. He's trying to explain himself to Time Blotter, highlighting something that characters keep bringing up to Denny over and over again, that he doesn't have perspective. And he's hearing this particularly from the characters who can time travel or who exist in time differently. It's a running theme on how having a different perspective radically alters how you look at things. Zeroth wants Denny to summon the Chronarchivist. There's no way I'm putting you in touch with her. That's a shame. I was hoping we could do this nicely, seeing as how, according to you, we're destined to be teammates and all. Zeroth, no. Please fight the fact that your domino mask doesn't connect across your nose. Denny escapes, and Zeroth calls Helios, but he's not talking to him for obvious reasons. Denny is then confronted by multiple versions of himself from different points in time, telling him that he needs to embrace the reality that he is a time traveler and he can no longer think as he did. And the ending panels of him talking to the Chronarchivist, I really enjoy how they're laid out. He doesn't understand how he can possibly assemble the 9. Phaeton's dead. Or is he?
That shouldn't be much of a problem for someone who can travel through time.
Wink. My word, in this panel, Denny is so handsome, Lois Lane would marry him. It is nice to see that Denny has to take time to alter his thinking, that he doesn't just snap into a new way of looking at time, which makes sense, for if one has regarded time linearly for their entire existence, it would be difficult to alter that way of thinking, or even accept the fact that one could execute such massive changes. Denny decides he's gonna rewrite history, while Zeroth watches on, not taking it well. Stop replaying the same clip from multiple angles from a secret satellite. Fight the fact that you're always dressed in at least business casual. So a lot to look forward to. Is Time Blotter going to be able to alter history? What exactly does he need the 9 for? What is this big threat that's coming? There have been hints that something's wrong with Culverton itself, so we're building to what that is. It also looks like the universe is going to be altered going forward and seemingly stay that way, largely because of fan engagement. So let's talk about some things. Let's get down to some of the pros and cons. On the whole, the emergence verse is really coming together. A clear path is coming into view and the core characters are being firmly established, and they're all distinct from one another and have their own voices. So you're able to get a handle on how people will react in given situations, and it's different from other characters. So you can put different characters in the same scenario and know you're going to get a different outcome. It does still read better if you read all the tie-ins, but those are less specifically tied to what is happening with the 9 at this point. Now that we're giving you insight into the characters, while also introducing others, some of whom haven't played that big a part in this main plotline as of yet. But it helps with that fleshing out of the characters to have read those as well. well. With all of that being said, issues 4 to 6 of an arc does feel a bit late to be introducing some of the big major plot elements that were dropped. It felt like those aliens invaded my brain with how abruptly they showed up. Things are picking up, but how the flow and pacing is going, it varies from plot point to plot point. Some are moving along smoothly and others feel a bit herky-jerky. For me, as I've said in prior videos, what's keeping me invested in this universe is the characters. There's so many different ways you could take them and so many different combinations you can put them in for stories, and because they're differentiated from each other, they could play out very differently. For example, let's just take Zoe. Her being mentored by the Time Blotter would look very different than her being mentored by Xeroth, but both would make sense. Speaking of Zoe, the social media elements are being decently handled over in her book. There's a plot point in issue 3 where she has conflict with her love interest because he doesn't want to be in videos with her because he likes privacy and he's doing the secret identity thing, and she has a hard time grasping it. She feels rejected, like he's rejecting her, because part of how Zoe has coped with having her emotions broadcast around her is to make her life completely public. And now she's with someone who wants privacy. It's a conflict that both relates to the characters and feels relevant time of recording, but is presented in a fashion that isn't going to age like milk. Not everything feels as fresh. Some may feel they've seen certain plot points before, and miles will vary on whether one feels they're being presented in either a new enough or more compelling way. As with everything, it's really up to you to decide. Issue 5 was released February 9th, 2022, so you can catch it before you hop in or get back into it if you're all caught up. So you have some time to catch up, time of recording. Zoe number 4 will be on February 16th, and the final crossover issue of the 9 number 6 will be on March 16th, 2022. So 3 issues, nothing too intense. No need to start a Time Blotter conspiracy board. Time recording. We'll see how the time travel stuff goes. Maybe then you'll need the board. I'm invested in this universe, and I'm excited to see where this crossover goes and where these characters go. That's me, and I've talked long enough, and I want to hear from you. Are you into the Emergents universe? Have you checked it out? Who's your favorite character if you have? Are you feeling the time travel? Are you liking the voting? Do you prefer physical or wish there was a physical element as well as the digital? Just looking to see where it goes? Not for you at all? Tell me things down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking this fine day spent discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.